This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar, and it's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. Now, I've mentioned before that energy healing is about intelligent focus of attention, and that attention is consciousness, it's being, it's pure perception, pure awareness. But energy healing is really about mastering the gap. It's about gaining facility over that place within the ocean of consciousness where the source of creation, and this is where the ocean picture comes in handy, because the ocean represents that source of creation level, that unmanifest, eternal, quality-less totality. And then the sky part represents the manifest field of creation. And the important place, okay, to put it in perspective, if we think of the physical material realm as being just this bit up here at the top, so it's like looking at an iceberg. It's got the tip of the iceberg is above the water, so you can see that. But you know that under the water, the iceberg is this big thing, right? There's this whole part under the water that keeps that little tip afloat above the water surface. So it is with our physical material reality. There's a source of creation, which is infinite, unbounded, but uncreated. It's like unmanifest. And then it gives rise to this whole subtle field, this whole subtle structure of creation where all the mechanics of manifestation are occurring. And then at some point, you have the actual physical manifestation at the surface. So if we think for a minute, well, the human mind can't really wrap itself easily around every single particle of the universe throughout all of space and time, because our human minds are taking this world in sequentially, one moment at a time. And it's a big universe out there. It's very big. I mean, we can transcend, right? And we can experience in a kind of systemic way, the whole creation. But if you think for a minute that this whole creation, just the manifest part, just the physical part, is vast, like that's no lie compared to the size of a human. That's a big universe out there. And so then if you figure that this whole part, that's just the tip of the iceberg, and that the whole part underneath it is just really, 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 really vast. So we're looking at this huge, complicated, like system of the way this source of creation manifests the whole creation. It's really big. It's really big. So what we're doing in energy healing is we're simplifying. What we're doing is we're saying, if the big iceberg would be hard for you to push if you like dive down and you came down the middle, you try to push it, you can't push it, it's too big, this is too complicated. But if we dive down, icebergs usually have little points at the bottom. So if we dive down to that gap area between the unmanifest and the manifest, and we work it from there, you can go down, you can move the tip of the iceberg, the bottom tip, the one that's way down there at the bottom of the structure. You can push that and the whole iceberg, you can turn the whole iceberg around from there. So energy healing is about turning the whole iceberg around. And exactly how do we work this level, this gap level between the unmanifest being and the whole manifest level of creation? How do we affect that with our consciousness? And our consciousness is powerful because it really is the stuff of which the source of creation is made. So with our powerful consciousness, we affect change here in the gap between the manifest and the unmanifest. And that gives rise to real physical effects, changes, manifestations at the surface that are amazing. And just on that note, as long as we're going there, I did put all my papers in order earlier, guys. And this is thank you to everyone who sent in questions. One lady said this beautiful thing. She said her neck discs repaired themselves in a short time 30 years ago. And, I've had experiences like that too. And I know a lot of other people that have too, where it can happen sometimes if you make just the right move at the gap, that the material just changes. It changes really quickly. So that's what we're aiming for. With energy healing, we're basically aiming to gain so much facility over the gap, that over the tip of the iceberg, that the underneath tip, that we can just in a little thought and a little impulse, an impulse of intelligence rising from this source of creation goes up there, and we've got things organized right at that level in such a way that as the intelligence and energy and creativity comes out of the absolute, it hits that structure that we've created here, and it gives rise to a very specified effect at the surface. All right. So that was more complicated than my usual description, but it also has more detail in it and hopefully makes sense to you guys. And every time I do that description, hopefully it will become a little more clean, a little more refined. So that's my aim. All right. So why are we going to take 3 minutes of silence now? Because allowing awareness to fathom into this depth of silence, the silent source of creation, is fundamental to understanding the gap, is to understanding what exactly are the dynamics of how that consciousness moves as it folds on its own nature and itself creates into the finest levels of the manifest reality. I was using this side before last night, but I was getting shadows. Oh, this side's working pretty well today. Okay, good. I'm going to ask everyone to close the eyes, and we'll just take 3 minutes of silence. And after that, I will ask you to open the eyes, and please take at least a minute to come out quietly, slowly, so that the silence integrates as it integrates into the field of conscious awareness. All right, let's close our eyes. All right. Let's slowly open the eyes. Take a minute. I'm going to do a little prayer of gratitude now. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being all of us and all of our ancestors, and all the blessings of living at this time on Earth with all the conveniences and technologies and all the pluses and minuses. Thank you for our bodies. And to the eternal tradition of wisdom, thank you for making that bridge between the unmanifest and the manifest field of creation. May our work today be efficient and concise. May we address all the systems that people would like us to address. And I spent some time trying to organize all of that so that I can touch on as many systems in the most effective way possible. May our session today really meet and exceed everyone's hopes for what we can accomplish. I thank you all for being with me. I thank you all for the amazing questions and for the incredible opportunity to sit with such great spiritual souls and seekers and individuals with such a high interest and intention, because the work that we do together is really quite wonderful. It astounds me every time. So I'm grateful to be with you. Thank you. All right. What did we do yesterday? Well, we talked about some systems yesterday, and I was answering questions, and all I'm doing in this is this webinar is really structured around your questions. So I just went through the questions and answered best I could everybody's. And where we left off yesterday, and you can check, I did want to say to one lady from Austria, I love you. And she asked a question about the skeletal system, but several other people yesterday also asked about the skeletal system. So I went ahead and it was one of the first questions that came up. So I did talk rather extensively about it yesterday, but you will get the recording. And we may come back and revisit the skeletal system a bit today. I was trying to avoid the systems that I talked about the last time, which was December, because there's so many systems in the body and we want to cover as many as possible. So I think I covered some of the big basic ones last time, like nervous system, digestive system, circulatory system, and endocrine system, I think maybe immune. Anyway, but we did talk a little bit about the nervous system yesterday, and there was a question about having pins and needles, and I noticed there were other questions also about headaches, and so we did go into some detail, and I think I offered a little exercise for that. And I think particularly the one where we started out the nervous system, just using awareness to kind of scan the system itself, was really, it's very, very simple, but it's a very good way to bring healing energy to the system, to that area, to the nervous system, especially because the nervous system is all about sensitivity. It's all about feeling, really. Perception, it's all about perception. So when we turn our perception in on this system that's about perception, it creates this, we talked about how it creates this 3-in-1 structure. Since we've got people with us here from India, it creates this structure, Rishi, Devata, and Chandas. These 3-in-1, they roll in on each other, and had some nice discussions about that. And a lady asked about being a coach for other people. And so we talked a little bit about that. And anyway, it's good to have you guys all here. Where we ended yesterday, though, was really interesting, because two people actually asked a question about, is there kind of like an overarching system that sort of administrates all the other systems? Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And So we kind of ended with that, and I felt that we sort of discussed that topic in more of an intellectual way, but we never really got down and got funky and kind of connected in experientially with that level of creation. So I think I was thinking, oh, it feels like that would help bring some resolution or completion. And I spent plenty of time talking about mechanics in between, and the mechanics of this gap area is very important. And on the note of resolution and completion, we have to come back in here just for a second, then we go into the experience. But what I realized is that with our awareness, we organize the pathways by which we navigate the finest level of manifestation, the very, very first. And yesterday I mentioned how it's like an ocean, it's so big. And so each one of us has to find a way to organize this ocean-like level of our own physiology. Just like we all find a way to organize our hair or our diet or our speech, our language, right? There are all these things that are field-like. They're field-like things. When I say diet, I mean, this is diet over the course of the whole lifetime. The course of the whole, how do you do it when you're a child? And how do you do it when you're adolescent? How do you do it when you're teenage and 20s, 30s, 40s, like that? Because how you do that influences your health in the long run, right? All these things. There are all these different areas that are kind of large and ocean-like. And we have to find a way to create stability and order, but still make room for flexibility and change and growth. Okay. So we're organizing this finest level from being unmanifest, the whole manifest level of creation. Here's the finest level here. So this is my chart. I'm using a pretty chart today. Okay, finest level. Impulses of pure creative intelligence emerge from the ocean of being, and then they hum or resonate in cells. You could call them cells. They're like cells. They're like regions or pockets of this ocean-like level of ourself. And you can divide those cells up any way you like. But the vibrations in there, they have like a kind of energy or power behind them that helps bring those vibrations. It drives them to the surface. At the next layer up, the astral layer of the physiology, about here, the physiology. These impulses, these frequencies, very specified frequencies, they appear as threads or cords or streams or rivers, however you want to describe, and they go everywhere through our universe, and they're made of consciousness. But this is the interesting part where they cross each other, and there are many crossings, as you can imagine. There are nodes. There are little mini pockets that hold very specific energy frequencies that reflect the marriage of two threads, or maybe three threads, or however many. All right. Those nodes spin. They turn. They're all turning. So we could say the web of life is this system of these threads, these cords of consciousness. Like if you think, this is an example I always give. I'm going to the store. Okay, so I make a little thread of awareness. It goes to the store. This way I don't end up at the swimming pool, right? I go to the store. Okay, so threads, they're made of consciousness, threads of awareness or attention. I'm going to heal some part of my body. Oh, I shall look at some system of my body. Then the thread goes. And what is the first system we're coming up with here? I made a note. Oh, no, that's on a different note. I have to say that too. Okay, we're not quite going there yet. But anyway, we're looking at the system of all systems first. And I think that's a great way to start today's session. Why not start at the top? The system of all systems contains all completions, all resolutions, all fullnesses. It is fullness of fullness, fullness of fullness and fullness of emptiness together. It is all in all. And if we give it a name, like remember yesterday I talked about how at this level there are like devatas. I talked about the devatas that reside in the body that are like the overseeing angelic type energies. They are literally the cells. They are the cells of the causal body. The devatas are. They're like segments of the causal body. I don't have my flute with me. Sorry. I was going to do a musical example, but never mind. No instruments are here. So the pure life force, pure unexpressed being comes forward, and it finds its way into a cell, into a segment or a region or a kind of a component of the ocean, which is your causal body. And there it's got a resonating space. So it hums. And it makes a very specific frequency that it would not make if you didn't have that very subtle structure around it. So the devatas are these structures, devatas in the body. And at that level, we experience them. As I mentioned, the life force is more concentrated as you get closer and closer and closer to divine being, the ocean of pure absolute divine being. Then it's absolute concentration. So at that level, there's a lot of life force. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of personality. There's a lot of personality. So at the surface, we can say, oh, yes, I have my digestive system or my nervous system or my endocrine system, and it's made of this organ and this tissue and that tissue. But when you get down here, it's experienced as a life force. It's experienced like an angel, like a being. It's experienced as a being. And so these are the devatas that oversee these systems, different systems of the body. So we're looking at the big, right? The biggest, the system of all systems. The system of all systems. So the body is the universe. That's at the physical. The body is the universe. But the soul of it, the presence of it, is that greatest, highest, most divine expression of being. It's Mother Divine. Mother Divine is the soul. The Mother Divine is the Deva that oversees the whole universe. And the story of learning to move the tip of the iceberg is a story of befriending these aspects of self, reverence and love and appreciation and recognition, even just the simple flow of attention. Like, how often do we think about the soul of the universe? Sometimes we're just busy. We're busy doing other things. I get busy answering emails. I'm not necessarily thinking, just taking a minute to quietly think about the soul of the whole universe. But when we do that, we bring our awareness and attention into this Davic level of creation. The value of our life being, the value of being human fulfills its goal. Dharma is fulfilled because you can look up Dharma. Oh, make a note of the time, my dear. We'll put a little flag to the Dharma part of the Dharma blog on the knowledge base. But Dharma is fulfilled because what all human beings do, it doesn't matter if you are a completely sacred, holy soul, or if you're an absolute, horrible criminal, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're young or old or what. What we do is we occupy human bodies and we intentionally focus our awareness wherever we want it to go. And when we do that, the finest byproduct of our digestion goes where our awareness goes. Soma goes. Oh, make a note about Soma. I have explanations of these. These are Vedic terms because the Vedic tradition saw all this amazing, there was such a great understanding of the entire subtle field, all this unmanifest being area that English just doesn't have words for. So I'm just borrowing big time. Thank you to India. I bow down again and again to the The great traditions, the great traditions. Yeah, see, other people do too. Thank you. Anyway, the point is that wherever the attention goes, when we send our attention, a single little teeny weeny human body, in the little human body, and we say, I'm going to put my attention on the mother of the universe. Guess what? Mother loves nothing better. It doesn't matter how big she is. The finest byproduct of your digestion goes there when you put the attention there. And it nourishes her heart. It nourishes her. It tickles her. It makes her happy. It fulfills. It validates the role of humanity in creation. Because as I said, if you have a human body, if you breathe and eat, then you make soma. And if you make soma, your soma goes where your attention goes. And if you put the attention on the highest, the soma goes to the highest. It nourishes and nurtures the highest form of life in creation, which is, by the way, it integrates the individual level of experience and perception with the universal level of experience and perception. So that's what we're doing at this part of the healing. I remember I said, oh, but we need to get into the experience of it. You may be noticing as we collectively are putting our attention on the highest form of life in the whole universe, how this seems to open a flow of bliss and love and support and joy and fullness. Oh, lots of hands go up. Oh, I've got a little thing here that shows when you raise your hand. Yeah, lots of hands go up. Yeah, it's incredibly blissful. I mean, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Oh, you're so sweet. It's so beautiful. And we can just rock in that experience. We can rock that experience, but I mean like a little oscillation. It's like a little oscillation of energy, a little wave is made between the individuality and the universality. And it goes back and forth like that, back and forth, back and forth. And it can go, the more settled your awareness is, the more it's like stabilized down here, source of creation, as an individual, the faster. And then it becomes infinitely fast, this rocking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth between the universal and the individual. And that integrates. It leaves an impression on the nervous system. It leaves an impression on the nervous system, which is the administrator of all the other systems, including the digestive system. Very important, because what that does is it upgrades your physical ability to produce high quality soma. So we put the attention there, the universal aspect of creation transcends. So the oscillation between myself individual and myself totality goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that causes this rarefication or refinement of the system. You may be feeling that. Remember yesterday when we did a scan, we scanned the brain, we scanned down into the brain stem and the spine, everything you can feel in your nervous system. It's so much bliss right there. Sleep in that place. Sleep in that place. Deep sleep, right there. Any of you who have conscious awareness, lucid deep sleep, you know what I'm talking about. Any of you who don't, I recommend that this experience will help enhance your deep sleep experience. This experience now waking state, it speaks to the experience in sleep state. It reminds you of the sleep of a baby. That nourishing, floating in waves of love feeling. All right. Yeah, we could just hang out there all day, but now I have an apology for everybody. Yeah, so yesterday, okay, that was really fun, you guys. I love that. Gosh. Anyway, all right. So yesterday I was mentioning about single parent families, and I gave a statistic that was in the 60s. And I got that, by the way, from one of my children who was reading it and was, quite upset because he said that He's saying that, one of the reasons that things are difficult right now in America is because there's so many single parent families. Well, my dear husband went and did the research for all of us. And some of you might have been looking it up too. In fact, when I asked my son later about that number, he said, oh, that's actually just African-American families. And indeed, I've got this chart printed off of the internet, and the African-American, it's 64%. That's in America. African-American. Overall in America, 34%. And this is from 2019, 2 years ago. And the chart is going up. It's increasing. So 2021 is probably more. And the overall for all different racial backgrounds, probably more than 34% 2 years later. But it's not going up super, super fast, at least not according to this chart that ends in 2020. So we can make links for you guys for these. But yeah, I didn't mean to give incorrect information. And I do like to correct myself when I make mistakes. So thank you all for being with me and for understanding about that. Yeah, American Indians, 52%. Breaks my heart. Anyway. I don't even remember what I was talking about that. Oh, and I saw a world chart as well. And America is way out ahead of everybody else for single parent families. And Russia is just behind us, but we're still way ahead of them. All right, you guys. So diving into today, many questions came in. Like a lot of questions were repeat questions, right? So I want to address the ones that are most important. And the two top questions are for the skin and also for the reproductive organs. So we definitely are going to touch on those. And then over and above those, we'll go into some of these others. And don't worry, we did cover a lot of them yesterday. There was also a question about vaccines. I'm probably not going to touch that one right now. It's such a controversial topic. And I love you. And I really do think that everybody has the right to make their own decision about the new experimental drugs, which actually aren't vaccines, but they are new and they are experimental. So I will let you make your own decisions about that. Oh, I guess we better cut that out because I use the word vaccine, right? YouTube doesn't like that word. If I use it, so you have to be careful on YouTube. Wash my mouth out for saying that word. Okay, let's go into this. So yeah, I answered that question. Okay, uterus, ovaries, liver, and kidneys. And there were like at least 2 people who came in asking about that. And another person asked about the reproductive organs, bladder, urinary, and hormonal changes. So also endocrine system. And then here's another person, uterus, ovaries, and liver and kidneys. Okay. And then those, so there we go, 3 questions right there. So let's just look for a minute. Let's look. I feel it's extremely appropriate to go to the reproductive system directly after being with Mother Divine. Because what is that glory that is the part of the female body that allows, and I think out of fairness to everyone, let us also be fair enough to include male reproduction as well. But what is that glory that actually provides a context for the creation of a human body? Wow, like this is just amazing. It's amazing. It is so, I mean, I almost, even though I'm a mother, I almost feel like, am I really qualified to speak on this? But I am not speaking from my own individuality. I speak on behalf of all of you. I speak on behalf of everyone. And it's not that I have to bring out every single detail. It's that I have to bring out the details that are relevant and important to you. So that's my aim. It lowers the pressure just a little bit. But it also makes the information more accessible and useful. Of course, there's the Devata, for the reproductive process and the reproductive organs. How we access that devata is first from the physiological structure. So we put this attention, we put the attention on the structures of the body that have this ability to pass DNA back and forth between two bodies. Amazing. Interesting. We're also talking about the experimental drug, because that's also RNA, right? That's made with RNA. So just letting the attention rest a little bit in that part of the physiology. And remember, always with reverence, it is the approach. It is the approach, I would say, colored by heart wisdom. So the heart wisdom is where we produce reverence and compassion and understanding, forgiveness, and so forth is here. All the feelings, all the fine feelings. And it's like when we allow the awareness to observe the structure, and if you close the eyes, it causes the mind to settle down a little bit like that. You feel into that structure. And I know some of you, especially ladies, don't have that structure anymore. So understand that even if you've had the organs removed, the etheric intelligence is still there. That in this part of the body, it's so tender. I feel as my awareness is going in such tenderness, such compassion for the level of struggle that not only we, but our ancestors have been through over the centuries regarding the structure and function of the reproductive system. Because it's only like really active, like for child rearing, for child creating, for pregnancy, that, there's a limit to a number of times a woman can be pregnant in her life, that to a large degree, most of the time that area is kind of rests. It rests, it sits quiet. And as a result, for a lot of people, especially because it's a place where it's a storage place. It's an archive. It represents a kind of archive in the body, really, both for men and women, right? Because for men, it's holding all the DNA, all the material, the reproductive material also. So it's an archive. And it's an archive of what? It's an archive of ancestry. Because what is the DNA? But it is the physical representation of our entire ancestry. And the thing about the ancestry is that all those individuals who manage to reproduce, they have certain things in common that we don't have in common with individuals who don't reproduce. So everyone, whether you reproduce or not, has an innate wiring to favor the reproduction process. And that includes favoring intimate relationship, like romantic relationship with another person. It's just the way it is. That means that we're wired up, even here in our hearts, to successfully navigate a nice relationship with other people. There's an extra hair. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of variation, and that's fine. Everybody is honored to do it the way that's most appropriate for them. Always, always. And there are a few people with us who've chosen specifically a celibate lifestyle, and that's also fine. It's also absolutely beautiful. It has its special beauty, and like freedom, this kind of liberated element. But for me, when awareness goes into this area, it's not just that it's an archive area in the physiology, it's that the archive is like an archive of seeds. So one of the questions yesterday was about, as we started, remember there's like the big system and that contains all the other systems within it. So there are cosmic archives and there are locations at the larger level of the universe that are reflected in this archive of the reproductive system. Archive and also the mechanics of manifestation to their finest and most magnificent degree. Remember, I said the key is here. It's here in this finest level of feeling. When I look into this part of the physiology, the delicacy is phenomenal. It's so tender. It's so delicate. It's so seeping in that knowledge. It's not just an archive, but it's like a wisdom field for all the information required to handle this finest feeling level of consciousness to the highest and most profound degree. Those weren't the best words, but I'm limited in English. This is the download that everyone's receiving. This is so important for the webinar, that this is not just about Dorothy blabbing away about something experiential. We go back and forth between understanding and feeling. And the feeling is the feeling of this delicacy. And I'm using the word delicacy, I feel like almost too much. I'm looking for another word, but God bless you. I know I've got writers in the, no pressure, no pressure. Just sit back and enjoy. But the tenderness, the softness, the refinement, the rarefication, the gentleness. This is the feeling that's coming in as a download to provide, it's like a liaison. It provides a bridge between our conscious awareness and the soul or the devata of the reproductive organs. It's so tender. It's so tender. It's all about it's not just the gap like this. It's just the point of it. It's just the point where the unmanifest meets the manifest. Just so sweet like that. And here we're meeting and making friends with that part of our own being. So precious, so sweet, so dear, so dear. Any interaction from our side, in order to do it justice, must also have that level of refinement. So the easiest thing is just to hold the space. Just hold the space for the relationship between the reproductive organs themselves and the intelligence of it, the angel of it, the devata of it. I am monitoring how this flow of attention how it's affecting change in the body. And one of the most important things that's happening right now in this healing, and let me tell you, it is such a tiny stirring at that level, such a small, very powerful. The smaller it is, the more powerful it is. That is it's cleaning away centuries upon centuries of shame and embarrassment and remorse and feelings of being dirty and incompletions. A lot of incompletions are clearing away. essentially what these are blockages. These are blockages to the flow of divine intelligence with this area of the physiology and with the physical form, the healing of the relationship, our relationship as a culture, as a people, especially in the Western world, a relationship, there's variations all across, but the relationship has, I feel, never really been delicate enough to do it really justice, to really do full justice. So this is a need for a change right here, is to be able to understand the sensitivity required to honor that particular intelligence in the physiology. It is powerful. It is incredibly resourceful, but it's also been a little bit out of reach, I would say, for most people. So forgiveness is one of the first flows. Self-forgiveness, self-forgiveness. Because what? And it's not just for yourself, it's for the whole ancestry. It's for the collective. Self-forgiveness, going back, of having not known better how to cultivate that relationship properly. It's not just forgiveness for our own selves, but I see the forgiveness moving through the collective field, and especially going to those individuals who took actions, said things that might have corrupted that relationship. Everything is divine being, everything is divine being, everything is divine being. Sorry, I said 3 times. Okay, I'm not going to apologize, but the reason I said it 3 times is that with each one, it's going deeper, goes deeper like that. Because there are individuals who, there's a lot of twisting of, there's a lot of, remember yesterday we talked about how the one has to separate in order to become the many, right? And the problem is not in the separation, because the separation is just natural. Like, that's the only way that the universe is going to manifest, is if the one separates to become many. The problem is when the separation becomes so dominating in awareness that we lose the one, that we forget about the one. That's the problem. The problem is not seeing the wholeness and the parts as one big system, because it really is one big system. And that goes for your ego. Okay, sorry, I am saying this, I'm apologizing so much. That's really interesting. Anyway, I do not apologize for saying ego. This is for the ego, is that because the ego is an expression, the individual ego is an expression of that separation value, then it got something lack of integration there, because there really is only one system there. There's only one system. There's only one being. There's only one great being. No part of it is separate. Some corruption finds its way into that, where the separation becomes so fascinating and so interesting and so overshadowing to the senses that we lose that reality, that it's one unmanifest eternal being that is showing itself or expressing itself as all this diversity. Download going through, it's a big download. Okay, for such a big download, delicate, right? What's happening? The download is integrated in our physiologies, and then from our physiologies as a collective, the download emerges into the collective field of humanity. And as it does that, because this area is so riddled with so much overshadowing of the relative, overshadowing the absolute, that the download, as it emerges into the relative field, into the field of the collective, for the ancestors, for the past lives, for the current field of humanity, it comes through with utmost delicacy. This allows an additional element of dignity. Dignity. Oh, that's very important. Dignity and modesty are very important, right? A lot more forgiveness is flowing too. And as I'm feeling it, I'm feeling that forgiveness, like big, thick, like heavy, intense waves are flowing, but they can just be the tiniest, tiniest little point of a flow as well. We want to do less and accomplish more by allowing them to be exceedingly refined. Otherwise, catharsis occurs, which is not bad, pure and innocent. Oh, she's asking also about the breasts. Yeah, so the breasts are the nourishers, The breast's job is after the baby's born, but the breast job is also to nourish oneself. We also nourish ourselves. The energy is produced, and this is the heart center area, right? All those feelings, all the forgiveness and compassion and mercy and understanding and recognition, all that love, all of it right there. So if that love isn't directed, a certain percentage of it has to direct back to the self. Otherwise, the breasts and the heart center aren't doing what they're supposed to do, what they're made to do. They're made to nourish baby just for the first few months of baby's life, or year or something, year or 2 years. But then after that, this whole center is still designed as a nourishing center, self-nourishing center. I'm glad you brought it up, because actually I feel that energy, that breast energy needs to, and that goes for men too. Men have breasts too. Not to gross anybody out, but there are cultures where men nurse babies. I lived in one for a while. The Yurt of Northern Australia. Anyway, enough of that. So it's okay. It's all good. Yeah, so breasts, and they nurture, and this delicacy, the healing that's taking place in the relationship between ourselves and the devata of the reproductive system, this extremely delicate shift in that relationship. I love someone put pure and innocent in there. Intimate, pure, innocent shift. It is absolutely enhanced by that nourishing quality of the breasts. Good job. Good job, you guys. That was a nice comment. I like that. All right. I have more comments. I have more questions. And so, there were a couple questions about the sun gazing yesterday. We can do these fairly quickly. One person asked, is the sun gazing, this was for the eyes, because a lady asked about floaters. And I suggested that sun gazing is great. And I kind of just outlined, do this, this step 1, step 2, step 3, like that. But I'd mentioned that it's best to look at the sunrise rather than the sunset. I understand you can do both, but there's no question that the quality of light at the sunrise is cleaner and purer and cooler and more softer. It's more like that soft delicacy. It's got more of that delicate quality in it. The setting, the old sun at the end of the day is more harsh, kind of tired energy in it. So you can look at the setting sun, but it's better to look at the rising sun. I know the lady who asked this is on the West Coast, or she's going to the West Coast. So I understand that if you live on the West Coast looking out at the Western Ocean, you get a good view of the setting sun, but you don't get a very good view of the rising sun. And I know that's a problem for different people, but the sun is still the sun. It's still our precious sun. And so, I don't think it's really going to hurt you, but it's not going to have the same level of freshness as the rising sun. Do we need to be at sea level in order to do sun gazing, or is high altitude? High altitude is fine. As long as you can see the sun in that very, very early 15 degrees from the horizon, right? So just that first little area there on the horizon, it's from about there up to about there, I think, and it's the first hour after the sun. So maybe in your area, you can't see the sun when it first rises. Maybe you miss the first 10 minutes or the first 15 minutes of the view of the rising sun. But you can still pick it up at 15 or 20 minutes like that and still watch for like 10 seconds. And some people, the more advanced, they say, well, over time you can increase the seconds, which I feel is all right. But because I'm not really an expert in it, I just know that it works because I've used it. I had terrible floaters about 10 years ago, and I got rid of them with this, and they never came back, which was really nice. And then we moved into a house where we can't see the rising sun. So I don't even look at it anymore, but it was just enough, just enough to get rid of those floaters and to improve digestion quite a bit as well. So it's a nice thing you can do. I'm checking this. Oh, and yes, I've gone through. One lady's saying thyroid. Oh, and there's this comment. I'd like to read this comment. Hi, my dearest. Hi, my dearest. Thank you for being here from England, from London, England. It seems to me that at the micro level, many of our individual body systems are corrupted in certain areas. Oh, good question. And this is further reflected at the macro level, right? With corruption in our governmental systems, broader still with the systems of Gaia, right? Like the loss of species, or species are going extinct. Like, I'm not going to try to quote numbers because I'll probably be wrong, but yeah, there's a problem there. Struggling and polluted. What has corrupted all these systems? Most likely ego. We talked about that, didn't we? Can we do a healing that allows ego to function as the body of the car called life, which drives us forward into our ever integrating experience, but keeps being firmly in the driver's seat, allowing us to stay on course to live our truest Dharma? Beautiful question. Beautiful, beautiful. So I would say, again, it's a little bit like the illusion of separation. It's not the fact that separation exists that's a problem. It's the fact that the separation overshadows the stability, as you so beautifully put it, firmly in the driver's seat, the stability of being firmly in the driver's seat. So is it ego? Is it ego that's responsible for being overshadowed by the fascination of the field of manifestation, the field of how the unmanifest being comes up and becomes all of this? I'm thinking about it. I think part of what does that is just the way the human system is wired. I mean, ego, maybe we're going to stay here a little bit close to ego, because if there's any egoic element, we want to make sure that we're touching on that. But humans are naturally curious, right? Well, they say curiosity killed the cat. But the thing is that humans are naturally curious, and we're naturally fascinated, and we're creators, right? We have this status. I was saying last night, like cats and dogs don't make stuff like this. They don't have hands, and a few primates have hands and they make simple tools. But humans, as humans, boy, do we make stuff. We make these elaborate artworks, and we make like amazing. It's amazing what we make. We make a lot. And not only that, but because of the development and evolution of the prefrontal cortex, we can understand the mechanics of the manifestation process from the source of creation to the finest level of being, all the way detailed up to the astral level, where there's the threads of the web of life with the spinning nodes between everything. I mean, it's like amazing, right? We understand that. Why? Because we have language, right? We have an elaborated language that allows us to describe abstract concepts, and the ability to describe abstract concepts allows our minds to make neural connections to understand those concepts even further. And I know, like, some sea animals have pretty elaborate languages, they seem to, but do they have prefrontal cortices? I'll have to check on that. I think there are some. Aren't there some whales or dolphins with nice big bulgy foreheads? We'll check on that. they're creators too. And I mean, all the beings are created. All the beings are creating in their own way, but we understand how we create from consciousness. We can now, at this time, maybe our ancestors, they hadn't talked about it, or they didn't have a system to really so understand, or in the Vedic tradition, they did, right? But a lot of that knowledge got a little bit lost or something. Colonization didn't help. Sorry. All right. You see, I feel passionately about certain things. But anyway, we naturally are fascinated with the manifestation process, both the things that we create on the very, very surface and all the fine details of how those surface expressions come to be. And this fascination and the desire to be ever like better, more improved creators causes us to dive deeply into these mechanics, which, I mean, we're doing that in these webinars, among other things. But hopefully we're also holding, that's why we go into the silence at the beginning, right? We're like, okay, we're going to put our anchors in. We're going to get our anchors established in being, and then we'll go talk about all this stuff. The refinement of the nervous system, that part of today's session, that was all about never, ever losing being, never losing being. Is it the fault of the ego? If we define ego as sense of self, we can say that all that we do, think, act, say, everything that comes out of us it emerges from that place where we hold sense of self. So we could say if a person has a proclivity to become overwhelmed by the relative, that somehow something's happening with their sense of self, which is responsible for them being overshadowed by their experience, their material relative experience. But also, we can say that ego is also being, right? Because there's only one being. There's just one big being. That's all there's going on right here is being and being and being and being. So ego is not separate from being, but for whatever reason, sometimes being will create a condition in a human, through the human experience of the sense of self being maybe stuck a little bit stuck in the smaller end of the spectrum of sense of self. So that the person thinks of themselves, I'm just a body. Or let's see, well, I took a course in brain physiology from a brain researcher, a local brain researcher. And he said that at the time that I took the class, of course, he was a strong believer that everything of this relative field evolves from consciousness. But he said the standard in the industry is that consciousness evolves from the nervous system, that like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? That in the industry, the standard is that you have a nervous system, and the nervous system has this flow of electromagnetic activity, and the result, the byproduct or the symptom of that flow of electromagnetic activity is consciousness. And then you've got that whole field of near-death experiencer people, right? Who are like, I died and I didn't have, my nervous system was dysfunctional and I was still here and I still had consciousness. And I think one of the reasons that the whole near-death experience community is on the rise and expanding and growing and interest in that area is because it kind of stands in opposition to this old paradigm, which really is on its way out. And of course, just as an aside, as a technical note, I do not recommend near-death experiences as ways to evolve consciousness. Please don't. There are so many more royal, dignified, comfortable, beautiful ways to do this. We've got a request for thyroid. Please remember to talk about the skin. Thank you. Okay, I would thyroid, guys, but the skin is really, really important. And so thank you for reminding me about the skin. Thank you. All right, so integumentary system. Integumentary system is comprised in layers. It is One of the overseeing intelligences of the skin is the air. There's a very intimate relationship between the skin and the primal element, air. Just like there's an intimate relationship between the vision and fire, smell and earth, right? Touch and air. And air, as we know, is one of those delicate, the sense of touch there's a kind of delicacy. The only element that's finer than the air is space. And that's what we have in the uterus, right? The space. In the testicles, there's space. Some kind of spaces in there. And also liver and kidneys use space as well. But sorry, I didn't really go into the liver and kidneys, guys. But anyway, yes, skin. Skin not only is this the air organ, but also skin is where we meet the world. It defines the boundaries of the physiology. And that's incredibly important when it comes to relationships, because our relationship with the world, our relationship with our environment, our relationship, intimate relation, romantic family relationships, all different types of relationships they reside within a landscape that is defined by boundaries. Our relationship with the devatas in the body, right? Remember I said, oh, you have to approach this devata with reverence, remember? You don't just go in there with your cannons blasting. It's like, hey, devata, come here, you're going to fix. No, let's not do that, right? It's got to be, it's delicate. So the skin naturally has a kind of, and there's a kind of dignity there, right? It helps sort of cover up all of our organs. We'd feel so exposed if we didn't have skin. Right? So there's a modesty element there too. And I'm just exploring with you guys. This is just looking and seeing what's there. We know if we look at the physiology of the skin, it's comprised in layers. It has several layers. I think epithelial layers at the surface, and there's a dermis, and there's the epidermis and the dermis, and anyway, there are different layers. And there's a melanin layer where the pigment comes through. But here's something very interesting. At the base of the dermis to the epidermis, I mean, the epidermis is on top, and then under it's the dermis. There's stem cells. There's stem cells in our skin, and that's why skin, it just recreates itself. It recreates itself. But it's interesting to know, because we think of stem cells as so precious and kind of important for being able to rejuvenate ourselves. And all the skin, all the layer under the epidermis is made of these stem cells. So we have an abundance, we have a plethora of stem cells in our bodies, just in our skin alone. Very good for recreating and rebuilding the body, right? For supporting healthy tissue. It's good to know it, because if we don't, I think what we need to do at this moment, there are two things I'd like to touch on here. One is the rejuvenation and the like robust structure of the skin, especially for those, if we're growing older, you see wrinkles and things, the skin gets a little thinner, so part of the focus is for that. The other part of the focus has to do with if there are imbalances in the skin. And it's not uncommon if an individual doesn't feel safe in their skin. We need to talk about that for a minute. I don't feel safe in my skin. When the relationships are not well, particularly if people are in abusive relationships, and particularly at that time that the individual, you can hold symptoms at bay for a little while, by sort of ignoring the truth. And that's why for a lot of people, that short-term solution of kind of just running away from a problem seems like a reasonable solution. But as I've talked about in previous webinars, it's not such a good solution in the long term. But in the short term, however, at some point or another, one has to go and face. And if there are relationships that are not well, these will naturally, spontaneously reflect in the skin. So if the skin is breaking out in hives or heat rashes or prickly experiences, look to your relationships with others and check if you are setting appropriate, healthy boundaries in your relationship with other people. Because the solution is not that somebody who's dysfunctional just needs to they just need to get their act together and become functional. No, the solution is you must set yourself, anchor yourself into a place of wholeness and into a place where you have access to the resources to set the boundaries that need to be set. And this is where we can start to feel comfortable in ourselves with our own fiery element. You know, the fire comes up in the skin, the heat rashes come up in the skin because the fiery element is not being handled quite right. And the fiery element is anger. And the thing is that when you set a healthy boundary with someone, it's important that the anger is being used in the most discriminating and careful manner. Again, it's a very, very the anger is being used here in this very, very delicate manner to say to the person, I love you. You're important to me. I will do this, and that for you. But I have a boundary here. It's really a set boundary, like you can't cross this line with me, because if you do, things will not go well. I have my teeth back here. And if you cross this boundary, right? And I mean, it doesn't have to be that gross. Like I'm saying it kind of like harshly, or maybe I'm not saying it that harshly, but you get the idea, you get the point, is that the purpose for the anger is to support and maintain those really important, really healthy boundaries in relationships so that you are not exploited and you are not victimized and you are not taken advantage of and you are not misused and you are not misunderstood, right? There are on many levels. It's very important. Now, actually, with regards to misunderstanding, I better curb that just a little bit, which is, understanding is a two-way street, and some people are unable to understand. You have to realize that sometimes if you're dealing with someone who's really dysfunctional or in deep personal denial about themselves and what they're doing or their feelings, you can't explain to them anything. You can't say to them what is wrong, because if you do, they can't hear it. So that's why it's up to you to position yourself so that the gift that comes from that is understanding yourself better and knowing where your boundaries are. And that comes from, and here, in this case, at an experiential level, we know where our skin is. You know where your skin is. And you know how sensitive it is. Some people's skin is more sensitive than others. If your skin is more sensitive, you've got to set more boundaries in more locations. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a crime and that's not a sin. If somebody is dead set on exploiting you, they will think they will lead you to believe that your setting of a boundary is a crime. Oh, you mean you were giving me and giving me and giving me and giving me all that time and now you don't want to give me anymore? Well, you're a bad guy for not giving, right? No. Everybody needs to be self-sufficient. If you give and give and give and give and give and give, and then one day you're like, oh gosh, I'm empty, I can't give anymore. It's not a crime to go, gosh, I'm empty, I can't give anymore. But the person who's been receiving will hope that you will buy into that idea, right? And again, that's just that element of the relative covering the absolute, right? Because really the story is that we all have anchors into the source of creation. We all have access to infinite resources. getting that integrated, getting that idea integrated, we all have access to infinite resources. It so opens up possibilities. It opens up such big possibilities. So this is the thing. I also have a video online about, I think it's hives. I have a video online about, no, it's, oh gosh, I'm losing the name of it. It starts with an S, and it's what people get if they've had chicken pox during their life. Later in their life, they get a disease that's shingles, getting rid of shingles. So that's getting rid of shingles is may also be helpful or useful to you if you have issues with the skin. Skin, yes, beautiful skin. Skin, oh look, everybody's skin. Focus on the skin. Thank you. Thank you. Rosea. The rosea is also, is it toxicity built up or something else like that? Yes, in children with eczema or dermatitis, there is an element of feeling unsafe. And what I've noticed in a lot of children who are really little is that they carry impressions from past incarnations. So a lot of times little children come into this world with that. And here's another thing, is that when children are born, they're covered in a kind of a white gooey substance called lanugo. And lanugo optimally should be massaged into the skin because it's really good for the skin. And in our Western society, guess what happens? The baby's born, the attendants go, oh, you can't hold the baby right now, mom, because this baby needs to be cleaned off and weighed and measured. And they whisk the baby away and they clean them. They clean all that stuff off their skin instead of massaging it in, right? And it's important to start, because this is the first time that the skin touches the world, right? So of course it has like a little bit of a kind of protective coating on it. And that protective coating is there for a reason. So anyway, yeah, about 150 years ago or something, all kinds of practices came up around childbirth that weren't really the best. And so one of them is, oh, we need to clean this baby. It's dirty. Oh my gosh, it came out of the womb dirty. And so they immediately do that. And not to mention these days, they get a whole volley of chemical shots as well, vaccines and stuff. But anyway, that can be changed if you're pregnant and you want to call a few shots on your own. You can request that this does not happen to your child. But I do think that most of us didn't even know this, but we had that stuff washed off our bodies when we first arrived into this world, and that probably wasn't the best thing for our skin. So it starts a person out with this feeling of being kind of like exposed and unprotected in the skin. And for some people, maybe more than others. But if a person came into this lifetime with these past life impressions and memories, then that can really, exacerbate the problem. As far as, okay, we're talking shingles. Yes, I have a video up for shingles. We've got birthmarks here. Birthmarks arise, or birthmarks or like age spots on the body. These come up as a body's way of producing more melanin, which is the pigment material in the body. And my experience is that the pigment material comes up around areas where there's some toxins in the skin. And they do change over time. So I think it is possible to clear those. We're after our time, so we're not going into a lot of detailed yeah, we could healing the skin. And then there's this one about rosea. The rosea, from my perspective, I'm just looking at that. It has to do with hormonal imbalance. And I'd have to look online. I don't know if the source of it is, I know people who've had it, and they say that the doctors just don't know exactly what causes it. And there's as far as I know, there isn't any like really effective cure in Western medicine for it. But it seems to be really intimately connected to feelings and emotions and imbalanced emotions. And again, like as I was saying before about like hives and that kind of thing, has to do with the imbalanced emotion with anger, with, you know, like fire in the body. The rosea, it's like the fire, but at a kind of a deeper, more abstract, more complex, uh, or detailed level that's more of it. It reminds me a little bit when I look into the feeling of it. There's a feeling of it that reminds me of hot flashes during menopause. For I know not everybody's familiar with that experience, but for those of you who are, there does seem to be some kind of like a little bit similar energy in that rosea, how it comes up and it kind of goes psss, and it burns in the face. And often people who have it, they have a lot of coolness in the body. It's like the head is hot, but the body is cool. It can be very uncomfortable, but there's a block. That means there's a block right here in the area where we make sense out of our reality. Because that's what the throat, that's what as I mentioned before about speech, remember? That because we can describe things that are abstract, like the manifesting process, we can therefore understand the process better, and then we can therefore leverage the potential of that process. So here, for people who have rosea, I would say we need to focus in the throat area. You know, clearly there's a lot more we could go into in this area, but we're quite a bit past our time now, you guys. I'm sorry. But at least we got to kind of put some attention on it and think about it. This lady's saying healing for the skin. And, you know, I would say, yeah, it can be from inflammation, absolutely. But it's a kind of like a delicate inflammation. Like it's not quite so gross and like kind of like in your, like out there sort of. It's, I was going to say in your face, even though it is in your face. It's more like hiding in your face, if that makes sense. It's like subtle, but in your face. Oh, you're welcome. All right, my dears. So lots of great questions came in. I know I didn't get to talk about a couple of things that I wanted to, but hopefully we'll get to do more. And I feel that each system of the body has so much richness in it that, we could perhaps do in the future webinars where we just focus on one system at a time. Another idea which just cropped up this morning was we do so well when we work together that and there's so much fullness that perhaps we could at some point, I'm playing with the idea, thank you. I'm playing with the idea of maybe doing some kind of longer, like intensive, something we could do like a kind of intensive or something like that. Oh, look, lots of hands raised. Yeah, because, we could, the more we sit together, the deeper we go. And so there is something to be said for that. So yeah, putting some attention on that as a possibility, maybe not quite so often as the webinars, like switching out a webinar, like a couple webinars a year to do something like a weekend intensive, something like that. Anyway, we'll think about it. You guys are the best. Thank you for your dearness. Thank you for being your nearness and your dearness. It was a really great time to be with you this time. And I feel like the healings that we did were beautiful. So bless you all. May everyone feel stronger and better and more in charge of their healing process. And we shall meet again at the end of April. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all then with all my love and all my heart. In the meantime, please, everyone, take care and we'll see you again soon. Bye.